She said, "It's not cheating if it's with a woman." I looked at her and said, "Interesting rule." Then I showed her the vacation photos of me and her brother in Europe. Suddenly, the rules weren't so clear to her anymore. I, 34M, never imagined my marriage would end the way it did. After 8 years together, I thought I knew my wife inside and out. Turns out, I didn't know her at all. It started 3 months ago when I came home early from a business trip. My flight got cancelled, so I caught an earlier one and arrived around 10 p.m. instead of the next morning. The house was dark except for the bedroom light. I walked upstairs, expecting to find her reading or watching TV. Instead, I found her in bed with someone. Not a man, her friend from the gym. They scrambled when I opened the door. Her friend grabbed her clothes and rushed past me without making eye contact. My wife sat there, pulling the sheets around herself, her face flushed. I stood frozen in the doorway, my luggage still in my hand. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house as her friend left. I asked her what the hell was going on. She took a deep breath and told me to calm down. Calm down. Those words made my blood boil, but I stayed quiet, waiting for an explanation. She said it wasn't what I thought. I asked her to explain what I saw then, because from where I stood, it looked pretty clear. She got defensive. She said I was overreacting, that this was different. I asked how it was different. She looked me straight in the eye and said it wasn't cheating if it was with a woman. The words hung in the air between us like a bad smell. I repeated what she said, making sure I heard her correctly. She nodded, doubling down on her logic. My wife explained that their relationship didn't threaten our marriage because there was no man involved. She said I couldn't give her what another woman could give her, so this filled a different need. I asked if she was serious. She said completely serious. According to her, she wasn't being unfaithful because it was just exploring a different side of herself. She even had the audacity to say that many people wouldn't consider this cheating at all. I left the bedroom and slept on the couch that night. My mind raced with thoughts of our entire relationship. Had there been signs? Had she done this before? How long had this been going on? I didn't sleep. The next morning, she came downstairs acting like nothing major had happened. She made coffee and asked if we could talk about it rationally. I told her there was nothing rational about what she did. She sighed and said I was being closed-minded. Closed-minded, because I considered her sleeping with someone else as cheating. She tried to justify it further. She told me that society's definition of fidelity was outdated. She said she still loved me, still wanted to be married to me, and this thing with her friend didn't change that. I asked if she planned to continue seeing her. She hesitated before saying she hoped we could work something out where I'd be understanding about her needs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wanted me to accept her affair because she decided it wasn't really an affair. I told her I needed time to think. She seemed relieved, probably thinking I was coming around to her twisted logic. That's when something clicked in my mind. Her brother. We'd always been close. He was only a year younger than her, and we'd become good friends over the years. We shared similar interests, loved traveling, and had gone on a few trips together. The most recent one was to Europe last summer. We spent 2 weeks exploring Italy, France, and Spain. My wife couldn't come because of work, so it was just the two of us. Nothing inappropriate happened. We both straight men who enjoyed traveling together. But I realized something as I sat there processing her betrayal. If her logic was that sleeping with a woman didn't count as cheating, then by her own rules, my close relationship with her brother could be twisted into something it wasn't. I spent the next few days formulating a plan. I wasn't going to just roll over and accept her double standard. If she wanted to redefine the rules of our marriage, then I could play that game too. I went through our Europe photos. There were hundreds of them. Me and her brother at the Colosseum. Us sharing pasta in a small Roman restaurant. Hiking in the Alps. Watching the sunset on the French Riviera. Swimming at a beach in Barcelona. In many of them, we had our arms around each other, smiling. Completely normal friend photos. But taken out of context and presented a certain way, they could suggest something more. I created a photo album on my phone with just these pictures. I selected the ones where we looked closest, happiest, most intimate in a platonic way. I added some videos too. One where he joked about us being the perfect travel partners. Another where we toasted to friendship in Paris. Innocent moments that could be misinterpreted if someone wanted to see something else. My wife tried to have several conversations with me over those days. She kept pushing for me to accept her new arrangement. She said she'd been reading about ethical non-monogamy and thought it could work for us. I just needed to be more open-minded. She even suggested couples therapy, probably thinking a therapist would side with her progressive views. I told her I'd been doing some thinking too. She looked hopeful. I said I wanted to talk about the rules of our marriage and what we each considered acceptable. She nodded eagerly, thinking she was getting through to me. We sat down in the living room one evening. She started explaining her perspective again, how different types of relationships fulfill different needs, how I should understand that her connection with her friend didn't diminish what we had. I listened patiently, letting her dig herself deeper into her own logic. When she finished, I asked if she truly believed that intimacy with the same gender didn't count as infidelity. She said yes, absolutely. She said it was a different category entirely. I asked her to confirm that this was her genuine belief and the rule she wanted to apply to our marriage. She said yes, that's what she believed. I pulled out my phone. I told her I had something to show her. She looked curious but not worried. I opened the photo album I'd created. I turned the screen toward her and started scrolling through the pictures. Her expression changed quickly. The first few photos, she just looked confused. Then I got to the ones of us at the beach, both shirtless, arms around each other. The ones in the hot tub at our hotel in Switzerland. The selfies we took at romantic locations. Her face went pale. I kept scrolling, not saying a word. I showed her the video of him calling me his favorite travel companion. The one where we joked about ditching our responsibilities and just traveling the world together. The pictures from our hotel rooms where we'd ordered room service and watched movies together. She asked what the hell she was looking at. Her voice was shaking. I told her these were from my trip to Europe with her brother. She said she knew that, but why was I showing her these photos like this? I asked if she noticed anything interesting about them. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. She said we looked close. I agreed. I said we were very close. Best friends, really. I showed her more photos. Us sharing gelato from the same cup because we couldn't decide on flavors. Him adjusting my shirt collar before a fancy dinner. Me with my arm around his shoulders in front of the Eiffel Tower. She demanded to know what I was implying. I told her I wasn't implying anything. I was just sharing photos of my trip, the same way she'd shared her experience with me. Her face turned red. She said it wasn't the same thing at all. I asked why not. She struggled to find words. She said he was her brother, and I was just trying to twist things. I reminded her of her own words. She said it wasn't cheating if it was with a woman because it was different. I asked if the same logic applied to men. If intimacy between two men didn't count as real infidelity in her book. She stood up, angry now. She said I was being manipulative and disgusting. I remained calm. I told her I was just following her rules. She insisted it wasn't the same. I asked her to explain the difference. If gender-specific intimacy didn't count as cheating in her mind, then surely my close friendship with her brother fell into the same gray area. She started yelling. She called me sick for even suggesting something happened between me and her brother. I stayed quiet, letting her rage. When she finally stopped, I asked if she was done. She demanded I tell her nothing happened. I said nothing inappropriate happened, just like she probably felt nothing inappropriate was happening with her friend at first. The look on her face was priceless. She realized what I was doing. I wasn't actually claiming anything happened with her brother. I was showing her how absurd her logic was. How easily intimacy could be justified or redefined depending on who was making the rules. I told her I'd been thinking about her words all week. About how she decided what counted as cheating and what didn't. About how she created rules that benefited her while expecting me to accept them. I said I found it interesting how quickly her perspective changed when the same logic was applied to someone she cared about. She collapsed back onto the couch. She asked if I'd really been with her brother. I told her the truth. Nothing physical happened between us. We were just friends who went on a trip together. Every photo she saw was completely innocent. But if I'd wanted to, I could have spun it differently. I could have used her own logic against her and claimed that because we were both men, anything that happened wouldn't really count as betrayal. She started crying. She said I was cruel for making her think something happened. I I reminded her that she made me watch her affair unfold in my own bedroom, and then told me I was overreacting. She said that was different. I asked how. She couldn't answer. I explained that this was exactly my point. Cheating was cheating, regardless of gender. Betrayal was betrayal. She didn't get to rewrite the rules of our marriage because she found a loophole that benefited her. Her relationship with her friend was infidelity, plain and simple. The gender of the other person didn't matter. She tried to argue. She said she genuinely believed what she told me about same-sex relationships being different. I said that belief was convenient for her, but it didn't make it right or fair. I asked if she would have been okay with me sleeping with another man under the same justification. She hesitated, then admitted she wouldn't. I asked why not. If she truly believed gender made intimacy outside marriage acceptable, then it should apply equally to both of us. She said it just felt different. I told her that was because she'd created a rule that served her interests without considering how it affected me or our marriage. The double standard was staggering. She wanted freedom to explore her sexuality while keeping me bound to traditional monogamy. When I pointed this out, she had no defense. She just kept crying and saying she didn't know what she was thinking. I told her I wanted a divorce. She begged me to reconsider. She said she'd end things with her friend, that we could go to counseling, that she'd made a terrible mistake. I said the mistake wasn't just the affair. It was her complete lack of respect for our marriage and her willingness to gaslight me into accepting her betrayal. She asked about the photos of me and her brother. I told her again that nothing happened. They were just vacation photos. I used them to make a point about how easily intimacy could be misconstrued when someone wanted to justify their actions. She seemed relieved but also horrified that she'd fallen for it. I moved out that week. I stayed with a friend while I looked for an apartment. My wife called constantly, texting me dozens of times a day. She alternated between apologizing, getting angry, and trying to rationalize her behavior. I didn't engage much. I'd made my decision. Her brother called me a few days later. She told him about our conversation and the photos. He was confused and a bit concerned. I explained everything to him. I told him the truth about what his sister had done and how I'd used our friendship to illustrate her hypocrisy. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said he understood why I did it, but he wished I'd found another way. I apologized for dragging him into our mess. He said he wasn't upset with me, just sad about the whole situation. He'd known his sister could be self-centered, but he didn't think she'd cheat. He told me he supported whatever decision I made, and our friendship didn't have to end just because my marriage did. That conversation meant a lot to me. I'd been worried about losing him along with everything else. We agreed to stay in touch and maybe take another trip someday when things weren't so raw. Update 1. The divorce process started last month. My wife contested it at first, trying to drag things out, hoping I'd change my mind. Her lawyer tried to paint me as unreasonable, claiming I wouldn't even attempt counseling. I had my lawyer present the evidence of her affair, the timeline of events, her own admission that she didn't consider it cheating. Her tune changed quickly after that. She realized she didn't have much ground to stand on. We moved forward with division of assets. We didn't have kids, thank God. That would have made everything exponentially more complicated. During one of our mediation sessions, she brought up the photos again. She told her lawyer that I'd psychologically manipulated her by making her believe I'd had an affair with her brother. Her lawyer asked me if that was true. I explained exactly what happened. I showed the photos in question. I explained her initial justification for her affair and how I'd used those same photos to demonstrate the flaw in her logic. The mediator actually smiled a bit. He said it was an unconventional way to make a point, but not manipulation. I never claimed anything happened. I just let her draw her own conclusions based on the same reasoning she'd applied to her own behavior. Her lawyer advised her to drop that angle. My wife tried one more time to get me to reconsider. She showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening. She told me she'd been in therapy, working on herself, understanding why she'd rationalized her behavior. She said she loved me and wanted to fight for our marriage. I told her I appreciated that she was getting help, but it didn't change anything for me. The trust was gone. Even if I could forgive the affair, I couldn't forgive how she tried to manipulate me into accepting it. How she created rules that only applied to me while giving herself a free pass. That showed me who she really was, and I couldn't be married to someone like that. She left crying. I felt bad, but I also felt relieved. Each conversation we had reinforced that I was making the right choice. The strangest part of all this was the reaction from friends and family. When word got out about why we were divorcing, people were divided. Some thought I was being too harsh. They said everyone makes mistakes and I should have tried counseling. Others completely understood my position. They said the double standard was unforgivable. A few mutual friends actually sided with her initially. They bought into her narrative that sexuality was fluid and same-sex encounters shouldn't be held to the same standard. When I explained the whole story, including how she wanted me to just accept it while she'd never accept the reverse, most of them changed their tune. Her friend from the gym, the one she'd been sleeping with, reached out to me. She apologized. She said she didn't know the full situation, that my wife had told her we had an open marriage. I told her I appreciated the apology but didn't want any further contact. She understood. My wife's family was more complicated. Her parents were traditional and were appalled by her behavior. They actually apologized to me for their daughter's actions. Her mother cried when I told her I was moving forward with the divorce. She said she'd raised her daughter better than that. Her brother and I stayed close. We got coffee every few weeks. He told me his sister was struggling but also seemed to be genuinely working on understanding why she did what she did. He said she'd been seeing a therapist who was helping her unpack some issues around entitlement and selfishness. I was glad for her sake, but it didn't change my decision. Update 2. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks ago. It took about 4 months total, which my lawyer said was relatively quick for a contested divorce that became uncontested. We split our assets fairly evenly. She kept the house and she could afford the mortgage on her own, and I took a larger share of our savings to compensate. No alimony for either party since we both had good jobs. I saw her one last time at the final hearing. She looked different, tired, older somehow. We didn't speak beyond what was necessary for the proceedings. When it was over, she tried to approach me in the hallway. I told her I had nothing more to say. She nodded and walked away. My lawyer asked if I felt good about how everything turned out. I told him I felt relieved more than anything. The relationship had become toxic, and ending it was the healthiest choice for both of us. He said not many people handled divorce with as much clarity as I did. Most of his clients were emotional wrecks. I told him I'd processed most of my emotions during those 3 months between discovering her affair and filing papers. Starting over at 34 wasn't what I'd planned, but it felt right. I'd signed a lease on a nice apartment downtown. I'd reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I'd started going to the gym regularly, picked up hiking again, and even started learning to cook properly instead of relying on takeout. My ex-wife's brother told me she'd moved in with her parents temporarily. She'd quit her job and was taking time to work on herself. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I just felt grateful I'd gotten out when I did. If I'd stayed, I would have been miserable, constantly wondering if she was cheating again, questioning whether her apologies were genuine or just attempts to keep me around. The photos of me and her brother became something of a legend among our friend group. People couldn't believe I'd thought of that. Some called it genius. Others called it petty. I called it necessary. She needed to see how ridiculous her logic was, and sometimes people only understand their own behavior when it's reflected back at them. Her brother found it funny in retrospect, though he admitted it was weird seeing himself used that way. He said his sister still cringed when those photos were mentioned. Good. Maybe that cringe would help her think twice before creating self-serving rules in future relationships. I started dating again about a month ago. Nothing serious yet, just getting back out there. It felt strange after 8 years with the same person, but also exciting. I was honest with everyone I met about being recently divorced. Most appreciated the honesty. One woman asked what happened, and I gave her the brief version. She laughed at the photo story and said my ex-wife had earned what she got. That interaction made me realize I'd fully processed everything. I could talk about it without anger or bitterness. It was just something that happened, a chapter that closed, making room for new ones. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled it. Some people might say I should have just left without the dramatic reveal. But I needed her to understand. I needed her to feel the same confusion and betrayal she'd caused me. The photos weren't just about revenge. They were about holding up a mirror to her hypocrisy. My life now is quieter but fuller. I have more time for hobbies, friends, myself. I'm not bitter about marriage or relationships. I still believe in commitment and partnership. I just learned that those things require two people operating under the same set of rules. When one person thinks they can rewrite the contract to suit themselves, the whole thing falls apart. Update 3. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized. Life has settled into a new normal. I'm actually happy now. Genuinely happy in a way I didn't realize I wasn't before. That's the thing about bad relationships. Sometimes you don't know how much they're draining you until you're free of them. I ran into my ex-wife last month at a coffee shop. It was awkward at first. She asked if we could talk. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. We sat down, and she told me she'd been doing a lot of work on herself. She said her therapist had helped her understand that her affair wasn't really about sexuality or exploring different sides of herself. It was about feeling entitled to whatever she wanted without considering consequences. She apologized again, more sincerely than before. She said she understood now why I'd done what I did with the photos. She said it was a wake-up call she needed, even though it hurt. She admitted she'd been selfish throughout our marriage in ways she was only now recognizing. I appreciated the apology but told her I'd moved on. She said she understood and hoped I was happy. I told her I was. Before we parted ways, she said something that surprised me. She thanked me. She said the divorce, as painful as it was, forced her to confront parts of herself she'd been ignoring. She was in a better place now, working on being a better person. I wished her well and meant it. Her brother and I took another trip recently, this time to Japan. It was fantastic. We joked about taking lots of photos but agreed we'd learned our lesson about how images could be misused. Still, we took plenty of normal vacation pictures because why not? We're friends, and friends take photos together. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about relationships, trust, and boundaries. You can't have a partnership without mutual respect. You can't redefine commitment to suit only your needs. And you definitely can't expect someone to accept behavior you wouldn't tolerate yourself. I'm seeing someone now. It's getting serious. We've talked about my marriage, why it ended, what I learned. She appreciates my honesty and my boundaries. She understands that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. We're taking things slow, building something real on a foundation of genuine respect. Sometimes people ask if I ever regret how I handled things. If I think the photo trick was too much. I tell them no. My ex-wife needed to understand the pain of her double standard. Words weren't going to reach her. She'd already rationalized everything in her head. Sometimes people need to feel what they've done to others before they can truly understand it. Would I do things differently if I could go back? Maybe. Maybe I would have just walked away without the confrontation. But I don't think I'd have felt the same closure. I needed her to see her hypocrisy. I needed her to feel the confusion and hurt she'd caused. And based on our coffee shop conversation, it seems like that moment was a catalyst for real change in her life. My life now is mine. I make my own rules, live by my own standards, and expect the same from anyone who wants to be part of it. I'm not bitter or closed off. I'm just wiser. And honestly, that's worth everything I went through. The story of my marriage ending over a double standard and vacation photos has become something I can tell without pain. It's just what happened. The past. And the future? That's looking pretty damn good.